For my activity kit, I created an octopus bead counting kit, and I have some octopus stickers, coral reef stickers, and some fish, and then I used blue construction paper to give it an ocean feel. So then once you open the kit, this is what is on the inside, and on the lid I have the standard, which is 2.1.PreK.A1, and that is no number names and the count sequence. And then I have the list of supplies that are included in the kit, which are the paper octopus, the string for the tentacles, and the beads. So here's what the octopus looks like. It has 2 googly eyes, a mouth and a nose that I drew with a marker, and then it has the 8 tentacles made out of string, and they're labeled 1 to 8. And then each tentacle has the beads on it that correspond to the number tentacle. And then on the back, you could even add more numbers like 9 through 10. Then I have the bag of beads for the students to use when they string the beads onto the tentacles. The purpose of my activity is for kids to practice counting numbers 1 through 10, and then also learn the counting sequence of counting on. So to practice counting, the child starts at the first tentacle and strings 1 bead on to represent 1, and then they would go through and string beads until they reach the 8th tentacle, or the number 8. And the other part of the activity is to practice the count sequence. So for example, the student may be asked to start at the number 4 and count up to go from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8. So they would string 4 beads on, and then 5 beads, 6 beads, 7 beads, 8 beads. Another way to use my activity is for students to differentiate numerals from letters. So they could do that by practicing writing numbers 1 through 8 or 1 through 10 if you continue on to the back. So they can do that by first tracing the numbers that I have written on the tentacles with their finger and then with a pencil to eventually get to the point where they can write the numbers on their own on a piece of paper using a pencil. And then next in my kit, I have my handout, which is my octopus bead counting activity handout, and it has the instructions listed, and then it has my 2 assessments tools that I use, the description of them and how to use them. And then I have the 2 assessment tools that I chose to use, which are blank, so that you could see what I would use to observe the child. The 2 assessment tools I chose to use to assess my activity are a checklist and a rating scale. And then that is my blank checklist that has the 4 observations I'm going to use, as well as boxes to record the observations and a notes section. And then I have my rating scale that has 5 different questions, as well as room to make notes. The first assessment tool I use is a checklist, and the purpose of my checklist is to observe and record a pre-kindergartner's ability to name numbers up to 10, differentiate numerals from letters, and count on when a specific number is provided. Math can be very tricky to a lot of students, and the activity I created for my kit will help students achieve the standard that I chose. My checklist is set up in a way that is easy to record what I observe the child doing mathematically as they complete my activity. The checklist can be used over a period of days rather than once to allow for the child to keep practicing their number names and count sequence. So at the top, I have the observations that I chose. So the 4 observations I chose are name numerals up to 10, match a numeral to the octopus's tentacle using numbers 1 to 10, differentiate numbers from letters, and counts on when a specific number is provided. So what you do is you mark the date and the time in the very top boxes, and then each is split up into 5 different columns, which represent 5 different days. So as you go down through the 4 observations, you mark observed or not observed, and then at the bottom you can add notes if you need to kind of clarify your observations from above. And in the notes section, if I make any, I would also include the date and the time. The second assessment tool I chose to use to assess my activity is the rating scale. The purpose of my rating scale is to observe a pre-kindergartner's ability to identify number names and their ability to follow a count sequence, as well as identify numbers up to 10 and know the difference between numerals and letters. My rating scale can be used over a period of time rather than for a specific period of time to help show a student's progress and achievement as they complete my math activity. The rating scale also shows how frequently the students were able to complete part of the standard through my activity. My rating scale has 5 questions, and the answers are based on a scale from never to always. So you would answer the questions based on the frequency or how often the student is completing the question that is being asked, which is derived from the standard. So the first question I have is, how often was the student able to name numerals up to 10? The second question is, to what extent was the student able to match a numeral 0 to 10 to the corresponding octopus tentacle? The third is, how often was the student able to represent the number of beads on the octopus tentacle with a written numeral? How often was the student able to differentiate the tentacle number from letters? And to what extent was the child able to count on to the next octopus tentacle when a specific tentacle number was provided? Again, this rating scale also has a notes section to kind of clarify any observations made, and it can be used over a period of days rather than one. You would just need to print out more copies and make sure you write down the date and the time that you observe. I think these 2 assessment tools are the best to use with this activity because they will help me gather good observations of how well the child is doing in knowing the number names and the count sequence while completing my activity, and it will help me get a better understanding of how well they're completing the standard. This activity is really fun because it is hands-on and helps students fine motor skills on top of them practicing counting numbers up to 10 and practicing the count sequence. It can also be modified to fit the needs of every student depending on their age levels or their counting abilities, and it can be used individually with a partner or in a small group, and it is a great activity to be used at school in the classroom, or you could even make it at home for extra practice. And it was super easy to make so that students would be able to make it themselves if they want to. So this was my activity kit that I created for a pre-K math standard. It was really simple to make and a lot of fun, and it will definitely be something that I plan on using in my classroom one day. And thank you for watching.